Hi, everyone. If you don't know me yet, I'm Chelsea. I'm the new rabbinic intern at Central. Pretty new, started just at the beginning of this month. And it's just such a gift to be able to join you all today, somewhat face to face. I'm also behind all the Facebook comments throughout the services. So I have been interacting with people, but it's just so much nicer to get to see folks and hear your voices. Um, so just before we begin, I'll just say that first, thank you for choosing to come to this session. And also, if you were interested in the other sessions that were available on your tickets, they're all being recorded, as is this one, and will be shared out afterward. So you don't have to feel like, oh, I missed out on something I really wanted to see. You can learn from them all. Um, so with that, Paige, I'll ask if you wouldn't mind putting the link to today's source sheet. Thank you so much into the chat. Um, if anyone is unable to access the source sheet, not a problem. I'm happy to also share my screen while we're doing readings directly from the text. So today, what are we learning? I've titled this session, I'm Calling You. I hope that evoked that song for people. I thought it was fun, although I won't sing it for you because that is not my skill set. I'm calling you how to pray so that God will listen. And the idea is that we're taking Isaiah 58, which is today's haftarah portion, as a jumping off point for a larger conversation about how to pray, how to call out to God, so that God will listen and give a response. And in addition to Isaiah 58, I've brought two other high holiday haftarah texts which also deal with the concept of and the experience of calling out to God and getting a response. So we will kick it off with text number 1, which is an excerpt from Isaiah. Let me share my screen for anyone who's unable to access the Google Doc. Great. And I'm just going to call on people to read, but if I call on you and you don't want to, not a problem. Just let me know, and I'm happy to move on to someone else. Karen, I'm wondering if you would be so kind as to read the Isaiah segment for us.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Why, when we fasted, did you not see? We afflicted ourselves, but you paid no heed. In your fast day you found pleasure, and you oppressed your laborers. Behold, in quarrel and strife you fasted, and you struck with a wicked fist. Your fasting this day will not make your voice heard on high. Will this be the fast that I choose? A day a man afflicts himself, bows his head like a reed, and lays down in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast, and a day favored by Adonai? Is not this the fast that I choose, to unlock the fetters of wickedness, to loosen the bonds of the yoke, to let the grievously oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? To divide your bread with the hungry, and to
Oh,
bring
sorry,
the
that should have said
poor.
bread. That was a typo of mine. To divide your bread with the hungry.
Okay, to divide your bread with the hungry, and to bring the poor wanderer into your home. When you see the naked, clothe him, and do not ignore your kindred. Then you will call, and Adonai will answer. You will cry out, and God will say, here I am.
Okay, I'm gonna stop my screen share so we can see each other for the conversation. So this excerpt is talking about a fast day of a people who really have gone astray from God's message, and Isaiah, as most prophets, are there to try to lead us back on the right path, as communicated by him, as communicated to him by God. And that was, Karen, thank you so much. That was a lovely reading with all the right inflections. And so my first question is more of just a basic comprehension one before we move a little bit deeper, which is, according to Isaiah, what behaviors are required to ensure that God will answer our calls?
It's Yeah, it's all the things Ari was talking about today in his sermon. It's about noticing others and seeing oppression and doing something about it. It's not, just closing yourself off in a little closet and flagellating yourself. It's about actually noticing the world, and don't call yourself pious and then oppress people, right?
Right.
It's noticing and doing.
Right, absolutely. And thank you for making that connection to the sermon today. That's a very important thing to highlight. Right, so the fast that we don't want is a fast where you don't eat food and you sort of make it all about that and what you're doing to yourself. We want instead an experience in which you're connecting to others and pursuing justice. And so my other maybe more personal question is, does this message about social justice and helping the needy align with your actual Yom Kippur practice? And does it align with your relationship to God or a higher power, however you conceive of that? Yes, please.
I'm Roberta Schechter. Hi. I I feel like I've waited all my life to say this. And since I'm 80 years old this October, I want to say it out loud. I was brought up in the Reform movement, and I was taught that we should dedicate our lives to making the world a better place. So when I went to UCLA, I was an honor student. I had the choice of any major. Now, I chose social work because it was overtly making the world a better place. I didn't know that I would not ever make a lot of money. I have a doctorate in it and I've taught it, et cetera, et cetera. But, we at that time, you were valued by how much money you were making, right? I never took high fees. And the people that I took were never people who could have paid those fees. They might be white, they might be black, they might be Spanish speaking. They had to know how to speak English to talk to me. But I did that work gladly because I always felt that, first of all, I was learning something every day. And that, helped me, I think, more than anything, because I wrote about what I did and I published, and I felt that I was devoting myself not just to teach people that, yes, you could write about this work and learn how to do it without, um, um, breaching confidentiality. It almost became a novel, everything I did. However, not the heart of it. And people that knew psychology knew what I was doing. Now, I think I've never been a rich person, but I've never regretted that.
That's a really beautiful sentiment. As someone who's, but both of my sisters are studying for their MSW, and it's a really beautiful way to spend your life and to pursue that work.
Well, each of them, you need to have the doctorate to really get anywhere in the field.
I will. I'll give them the career advice
Yes.
in another context, but I appreciate that. I'm curious for anyone else if this Ed, I see is that a hand? Yeah.
So, what all of this, every time I've heard this discussion, I do always compare the way some of us practice being Jewish as opposed to the way other people practice being Jewish, and the importance that people put on ritual, which I'm not against. I love ritual, but the idea that it sort of supplants almost everything else in Torah. That so it's Yom Kippur and you have to fast. So if you fast, that's it. That's the sum total of what your requirements are for this day. Can't be so. And the Isaiah portion that Karen read, I think says that. At least it says that to me.
Yeah, I think I also like the idea, jumping off of that, of maybe the traditions being like a floor and not a ceiling, or one element in a much larger picture. I think that that's a beautiful thought. Elizabeth will take as our last comment, just because this is a very short session, but I would love to hear what you have to say. Oh, you are muted. Let's see if we can get you unmuted, Elizabeth.
Okay.
Oh,
Hi.
okay.
Let me know. I just came from watching the Jews of Color seminar, and one of the comments that one of the participants, who actually is a converted, said that one thing that appealed to her about the religion, it wasn't simply doctrine, that it's a religion that requires action.
Hmm.
That that it's not enough, as Ed was saying, to simply fast and read the Torah and beat your breast, but take the actions, the kind of actions every day that Isaiah is speaking of.
That's beautiful, and thank you for bringing that learning also into our space. I wasn't able to attend that session, and that sounds like a really beautiful note to take out of it. So just being cognizant of time, rather than go into our third question, I'll just make a note here that I found it really powerful, that God's response when you call out after doing sort of all of the right things, is Hineni, here I am. Right. And that's, many people throughout our traditions say that. And it doesn't just mean like, I'm here, right? Abraham responds in that way to God's call in the Akedah. And the idea that it's really like a fully being present and committed to the other, and for God to respond that way to us, I just thought was very powerful. But we are going to move on now to the Jonah text, who is another person who calls out to God and gets a response. And just as a little bit of context, all of chapter 2 of Jonah, or the vast majority of it, is Jonah's prayer to God from the belly of the fish or the whale, whatever you like to think ate him up. And I have skipped around a little bit in the excerpt, but I haven't cut out anything that would take out the meaning of what's going on. So I'm going to share my screen again. And I am wondering, Yaakov, if you would like to, let me scroll down to make it so that it's readable. If you would like
Get
to,
somebody else because I can't see the print.
not a problem. Thank you for letting me know. I see Ron and Freddie Norris have joined us. Yeah. Would both or either of you like to read the Jonah excerpt?
Sure.
Okay. Not together.
Not together. Not in harmony.
And Jonah
So-
prayed to Adonai, his God, from the innards of the fish. And he said, I called out from my distress to Adonai, and God answered me. From the belly of Sheol I cried out. You heard my voice. You cast me into the depth, into the heart of the seas, and the current engulfed me. All your breakers and your waves passed over me. To the base of the mountains I went down. The bars of the earth closed behind me forever. But you bring my life up from the pit, Adonai, my God. As my being grew faint, I remembered Adonai, and my prayer came to you, to your holy temple. They who give heed to vaporous emptiness forsake their own goodness. But I, with a voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. That which I vowed, I will complete. Salvation belongs to Adonai. And Adonai spoke to the fish, and he vomited Jonah onto the dry land.
Thank you so much. So these are all translations that I've done, and I know vomited is maybe not the nicest word for the end. I think that the JPS translation is a little bit less colorful. But thank you so much for reading that. I am curious, reading this prayer of Jonah from the inside of the fish, what you think makes this prayer worthy of God's response, maybe especially given the fact that Jonah is a reluctant prophet, right? He doesn't answer the call enthusiastically, he tries to run away, hence the fish. And I'll just say there's no right answers. I'm not looking for a particular answer here. Just what in this text makes you think that this prayer is worthy of a response? Yeah.
I'm struck by one thing, and I know that it may sound humorous, but at the end of it, God speaks to the fish.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, and to me that has a lot of meaning.
Right, right. And actually, it doesn't sound silly or off. A lot of people read the book of Jonah as a satire, as a humorous satire. So that's very much on brand.
God said, I feel like God will be saying to the fish, I hope you're all right. Because doesn't God love the animals as much as man? If indeed God would love man. I think the animals are, in a way, more innocent.
Wow.
Interesting. Susan, yes.
I think one of the things that resonates with me is how far away Jonah feels that he is, and has to put some trust that from the belly of this fish, and he makes this connection to the depths of Sheol, which is supposed to be like the depths of hell, and yet he has this trust that sincerely reaching out to God, God will hear. And it seems that he does this. There's a sense of real teshuvah. And also, I believe that Rabbi Bookdahl talked about this story in her Rosh Hashanah sermon, the Jonah story.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I also want to pull out, I love your focus on sort of the depths and the detachment and how far you might feel from God. The whole, there's sort of a theme within the whole first part of the book of Jonah. He goes down to the port, he goes down into the ship, he goes down into the fish, he's descending for so much. And this prayer is where it turns around, right? You're going down, 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 and then suddenly there's like an uplift when he connects to God, and there's something very powerful there. I saw Yaakov's hand as well. Yes.
Just to change the topic for a while, I just finished yesterday. I finished listening to Rabbi Micha Goodman, who is one of the scholars of the Hartman, David Hartman, and he gave a talk of 2 hours on the book of Job. Now, the book of Job is so fundamental to try to understand something, because what Goodman is saying, I recommend that anybody who wants to really get something on where God, who is God, what is God doing, listen to that, because Goodman says, sure, we are told in this whole situation, we are told that God, you don't go to God and do all the ritual things and hope for salvation. But he said also, even if you do the things that Isaiah recommend, even if you do all the just things, by the way, it's only one book of the Bible, it tells you to do the just things, even then, in the times of Isaiah and even later, God is not really quite available. And he points to the fact that Job, the fate of Job was that he lost everything. And Job was a just man, and he did the right things socially and justly, and nevertheless he got this disaster on him. And why? Because God wanted to play with Satan. And this whole idea puts us in a terrible situation, because it ties to the Akedah. Because if you read the Akedah, the essence there is, it starts, Veha Elohim Nisa et Avraham. God played with God, because the story of the Akedah Everybody except Avraham knows that it's a game. Avraham is the poor guy that suffers.
It's a really difficult text to read. I'm actually going to end up moving us on to the next text just because we only have 10 more minutes. I'm so sorry about that. But I want to move forward. But I am just going to say, related to that, theodicy is a huge problem. Why do bad things happen to good people that we aren't going to be able to solve in this session? But I do think it sort of relates to the last question I had, which I'm just going to ask you to think your answer to yourself. Of when you are in distress, does it make you more or less likely to want to reach out and pray to God, right? Jonah is praying from his distress. We see many other characters in the Bible sort of played with in this way that can be very difficult and very disturbing. And when you are in a place of distress, is that the side that you access, or is calling out and praying to God something that actually feels meaningful to you? So we're gonna, just because of time constraints, we're going to cut this a little bit short, I'm so sorry, and move on to the Hana Story, which again is one of our high holiday haftarot, really beautiful and interesting things that Central does with it year after year. I find so cool. And just as context, Hana is barren. She desperately wants a child, and in the world in which she is living, God controls that. God is in charge of whether wombs are opened or closed, whether you're barren or fertile. And so she doesn't go to an OB, she goes to God to try to address this problem. So I'm going to share my screen just one more time so that we can read the text together. Scroll down a little bit. Scrolled a little too far. Okay. Let's see. Is there anyone who hasn't gotten to speak or to share that would really like to read? If not, I'm happy to volunteer someone to. Susan, do you mind being voluntold to read?
No, I don't. I have never heard that phrase before, but I love it.
Thank you.
As a teacher. She was deeply embittered, so she prayed unto Adonai, weeping all the while. And she made a vow, saying, Lord of hosts, if you will look upon your maidservant's affliction and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, and if you will give your maidservant male offspring, I will give him to Adonai for all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. And it happened as she continued to pray before Adonai that Eli watched her mouth. As Hannah was speaking in her heart, her lips moved, but her voice could not be heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. And Eli said to her, How long will you go on drunk? Rid yourself of your wine. But Hannah said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of hardened spirit, but I drank no wine. I have been pouring out my soul before Adonai. Do not take your maidservant for a worthless girl, for it is out of an abundance of my trouble and my grief that I have spoken until now. Not spoken?
That I have spoken, as in that's what her prayer is coming from.
And it happened at the turn of the year that Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called him Samuel. For from Adonai I asked for him.
Thank you so much, Susan. So I'm going to end up just asking one of the questions that I had here about Hannah, which is Hannah's prayer is accompanied by weeping, right? Crying and weeping is really central to that. And it's also considered to be the first instance of personal prayer in the Torah. Relatedly, we learn in the Talmud that even when the gates of prayer are locked, the gates of tears are always open. And I'm wondering, based on these two texts, what role do either sadness or other intense emotions play in your own prayer experience? Ed, yeah.
You know, obviously, sadness and tragedy are the kind of things that bring us closer to the synagogue. Often, at least that's the catalyst. Uh, and my own experience has been to underscore how important that can be. So and also, to be honest, to hear the Hana story a week after hearing that unbelievable drosh about it last week, it's really, it's sort of that Hana story has almost always been illustrated well at Central Synagogue, but never as well as last week. And like everybody has a different tragedy, everyone has a different event. Some things that some people think are really good events are actually other people's tragedy. Until I went through it, I didn't realize that how important it was, both the synagogue and the community. So.
Right. I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Karen, yeah? And Sandy afterward, I think will be our last comment.
I think when you talk about what's the emotion that one feels when one turns to prayer, for me it is pain and almost a sense of hopelessness, because part of what I pray for is strength, or the direction or the way forward. So whatever that emotion is that leads one to want that is really what I feel.
Thank you for sharing. And last but not least, Sandy.
Yeah, for me, it cracks my heart wide open and really allows me to feel more connected. And I have my own Hana story, and he's 24, and it's an amazing personal story for me.
Wow. That is wonderful and amazing. And I know, many people form families in many different ways. It is especially lovely, I think, when you can find a piece of your personal narrative resonating in our collective text. Okay, so just in our last 2 minutes together, the time went by so fast. I was thinking sort of about what all of these texts have, right? Isaiah really pushes forward the idea of corresponding actions that go along with prayer as sort of a prerequisite to get it answered. The story of Jonah shows the importance of, even when you're feeling disconnected, even when you're feeling far away, that act of reaching out, which I think is inherently a very hopeful act, becomes worthy of a response. And the Hana story shows that from a place of genuine, deep emotion is really where the power of our prayer comes from. And I'm curious for you to think to yourself, or if you're able to put this up in the chat, I would just love to see people's responses roll in. If Isaiah, Jonah, or Hana, their model feels closer to your approach to prayer, or some combination of the three. Yeah, I'll say for myself, I've always been a huge Hana fan. I just love that text, and I love the idea of genuine emotion playing in so strongly to one's prayer life. But I think regardless of which one or two or three speak most to you, the thing that's really lovely to learn together, especially on this day of all days, is that there is merit and value to reaching out, to calling out, even if we don't, necessarily believe in a God that intervenes in human affairs quite the same way as God did in the Tanakh and in these stories. There's something there, and maybe it's reaching out to community and getting value from being connected to others. Maybe it's just articulating your needs to yourself. But I really think that these models of prayer are beautiful and have something to teach us all year round. So with that, we are at time, and I just want to thank you all so much for coming in to contribute and to learn together. I'm so sorry if you had what to share that we didn't have time for just because it was such a small slot, but your contributions and your participation are just wonderful and mean so much to me, and I'm always around if anyone wants to talk about any of these ideas further. So Gemar Chatima Tova. And if you are fasting, may you have an easy fast. And regardless of how you practice, may you have a very meaningful Yom Kippur.